What's happening? Thanks for joining me as always. It is much appreciated on this Thursday morning. Let's start here. The Dynasty documentary will get released, at least the beginning of this documentary series, released tomorrow morning on Apple Plus. And Chad Graff wrote about his number one takeaway in The Athletic from this documentary. And it is a very important, it is a critical piece of information regarding how things went off the rails between Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, why Brady eventually left the Patriots. I know we want to focus as much as possible on 2024, and we continue to do that here on this podcast. But when something big comes out, if it has to do with the past, we're also going to cover it here. And so Tom Brady sits down along with a bunch of other former Patriots and Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft for this documentary. And he talks about the relationship between he and Belichick, and he talks about why he left the Patriots, what happened at the very end. And here's what Chad Graff wrote about that. Brady makes clear his departure had more to do with who was coaching the team than the amount of money he was offered. A lot of people have looked at this, including myself, and they've said, well, Brady left the Patriots because Belichick did not want to give him the Drew Brees contract. 2 years, $50 million, pretty much all of it guaranteed. If Belichick did that, Brady would have ended his Patriots career, saying goodbye and retiring from the NFL. Of course, that didn't happen. But if you watch this documentary, again, it begins tomorrow on Apple Plus, Brady tells us it wasn't about the money. It went beyond the money. The biggest issue was the relationship between he and Belichick and how Belichick treated him throughout his Patriots career. Here's what Brady says in the doc. Quote, me and Coach Belichick, we did what we loved and competed for 20 years together. But I wasn't going to sign another contract in New England, even if I wanted to play until I was 50. And here is the most important part of what he says. Based on how things had gone, I wasn't going to sign up for more of it. Brady had enough. Brady had enough of Belichick. Brady had enough of Belichick's treatment of him and how he was so stringent and tough on Brady year in, year out, every single minute of every single day of every single week, month, and year. And Brady at that point, after being here for 20 years, had had enough of the head coach. He was tired of it. Based on how things had gone, I wasn't going to sign up for more of it. I don't want any more of this. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to come to work and have to deal with Belichick and deal with how he approaches these things. Enough is enough. I'm tired of it. Same old, same old. Graff writes, more than anything, the documentary feels like a referendum on how bad the Brady-Belichick relationship got and why it never had a storybook ending. Now, it's not just Brady who's talking about this, and that's important because if it was just Brady, then you could look at it and say, well, Brady's viewpoint of things kind of tainted because of how it ended. Belichick didn't want to pay him, so this is kind of Brady taking a shot back and being a little bit petty. But it's not just Brady who describes the relationship between he and Belichick in this documentary. It is other former Patriots and guys that you don't think would say these kinds of things. Guys that we don't think would talk on the record about the relationship between Brady and Belichick, including several that were on the roster this past season. And all of these players disclose, Chad Graff writes, just how difficult it was playing for Belichick. Matthew Slater says, quote, it was brutal. Gronk describes pulling up to one Patriot place and not wanting to get out of his car to go into work. So Slater, who'd been here forever, somebody was seen as a leader, somebody was seen as completely and utterly balanced, right? Someone who is going to handle things with maturity, thinks of the big-time perspective and big picture with everything. Here's Slater telling us that it was brutal. Belichick, Brady, playing for Belichick, brutal. Gronk says there were mornings he didn't even want to get out of the car and go into work. Wes Welker, I think this is the most damning one. Wes Welker, and of course, Welker and Belichick have a history. Welker compared Brady to an abused dog for continually going back to work for Belichick. An abused dog. I just want you to picture that, right? Visualize an abused dog. and how the dog keeps going back to its owner, even though the owner keeps mistreating the dog, abusing the dog. To Welker, looking at the relationship between Belichick and Brady, Brady was that abused dog. That's how bad he thought it was. Former teammates and occasionally Robert Kraft, too, describe a hostile work environment and miserable atmosphere inside the team's headquarters. Kraft, at one point in the documentary, says, quote, "Tom and I had a number of discussions about how Bill treated him. Tommy is very sensitive. He was always looking for Bill's approval, almost in a father-son kind of way. And that's not Bill's style ever to give that," unquote. So we've got Matthew Slater on the record, Gronkowski on the record, Welker on the record, Kraft on the record, and Brady himself on the record saying that the relationship between the head coach and QB1 was a disaster. It was fractured. It was done. And Brady could not foresee himself coming back here to New England playing for that coach, no matter how much money Belichick and Kraft were willing to actually give him. So it went beyond the contract. And I know a lot of people out there, and don't forget to give us a like, thumbs up. All the thumbs up means more eyeballs means more traffic means more interaction. So give us that like, especially if you're watching on YouTube, to beat that YouTube algorithm. Rate, review, and subscribe. Trying to hit 2,000 subscriptions by March 1st. I know a lot of people have looked at this over the last several years, and they said, oh, come on. Give me a break. It wasn't that bad. Who are these anonymous sources? That was one of Belichick's favorite things, right? Anonymous sources. Let me guess, anonymous sources. Everybody was slamming the anonymous sources. People were slamming Seth Wickersham for writing the story back in 2017 and 2018 and what happened at that time. And so I know a lot of people who did not want to believe that the Brady-Belichick relationship was that bad, had reached a boiling point, that Brady did not even want to consider returning. For people who thought that all of that was crap and didn't want to believe any of it, well, these are not from anonymous sources. These are from players on the record. Welker, Gronk, Slater, Brady, from the owner himself, Kraft. And this isn't a documentary that was filmed after Belichick left New England, right? This is footage that had been collected before the season, during the season. This is stuff that was happening without knowledge that Belichick would be out of New England and no longer coaching the Patriots. So don't look at this as a bunch of guys just trying to take shots at Belichick on Belichick's way out. That's not what this is. This documentary has been filmed over a significant amount of time. So no longer are we talking about anonymous people. No longer are we slamming Seth Wickersham's reputation as a writer and saying, oh, Seth Wickersham and ESPN were just out for the Patriots. This is Brady and his former teammates telling you how bad it was. And I just think that Belichick, he overlooked the accumulation of tough love. Look, you could be tough on people. You could be tough on people that you love. The whole idea of the tough love approach, right? To get more out of somebody. But we're talking about a relationship that had gone on for 20 years. For 2 decades, Belichick handled Brady and a lot of the other guys on this team, pretty much the entire team, the same way, day in and day out. And while people might say, well, Nick, that shows an incredible amount of consistency and stability. And it does. But put yourself in the shoes of Brady. Put yourself in the shoes of these players. Guys that have been on this team for 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And they're getting treated the same way they were treated when they were a rookie. Outside looking in, that seems logical and it seems great. Everybody's on the same page. Don't treat somebody as if they're different. But in reality, we know there's a difference. We're talking about the greatest player of all time. And he has to walk into that facility every single day and get treated like he's done nothing in his career. And I want you to put yourself in those shoes. Whatever you do for a living, imagine that you've done it for 20 years. But yet every day you walk into work to punch the clock, your boss treats you like it's your first day. How annoying would that be? How frustrating would that be? I know we look at professional athletes differently, but we're talking about human beings going into work every day after accomplishing what you've accomplished. You're the best salesman that has ever been in this company, and you've been doing it for 20 years, yet your manager treats you like you're a rookie, like it's day one, like you haven't sold anything. I mean, think about how infuriating that has to be. How Belichick treated Brady's right-hand man and Alex Guerrero at the time. And yes, you do at times have to curtail the way you approach players dependent on who that player is. That's how this works, or at least that's how it should work. And Belichick was unrelenting for 20 years. He was unrelenting for 2 decades, treating Brady, as Wes Welker said, like an abused dog. And finally, Brady had the opportunity to get out of that relationship, and he got out of the relationship. And it wasn't about money. All right, before we move forward, we got a super chat here. Again, don't forget to send your super chats. You can jump to the front of the line with your question or your comment. And, of course, you contribute financially to the program. Nathan says, hey, Nick, my son David thinks your intro is cool. Sage Francis, rap artist, underground guy, went to the University of Rhode Island like I did. I believe we both studied and graduated with a degree in journalism. Sage was there before I was, and I actually was a fan of Sage, and I reached out to him to see if I could use one of his beats for an intro, and Sage actually went into the studio that night and spent hours putting the intro together. This was back, by the way, in 2012, and it just shows you the intro today, 12 years later, is still as creative and unique as it was more than a decade ago. I don't know if that says a lot about Sage or it says a lot about the business that people still struggle to try to reinvent things and create different things. Can you give my son a what's happening? What's happening? With all the cap space the Pats have and contracts so big for good players, what is realistic number of impact players they could bring in? Nathan, again, I appreciate the super chat, and I appreciate your son loving the intro. And always give you what's happening. Always give you what's happening. So the amount of impact players. Look, I don't think it's crazy to believe that you can find an impact receiver on this market. I don't think it's crazy to believe that you can bring back Hunter Henry, who will have impact within this new offense. It's also about retaining some of your players. If you're able to bring back Owenu, that will impact your team on the offensive line. But when we look at offense, Nathan, realistically, most of that is going to come from the draft. If you sign a free agent quarterback, I don't think it's going to be Kirk Cousins. You might be looking at a Jacoby Brissett, a Gardner Minshew, and that's not going to have everlasting impact on your football team. We're looking at the draft for the most part when we want to talk impact players and the ability to put those guys on the roster, put them on the field, and immediately reap the benefits. So I think you'll see. For example, if you draft a quarterback at number 3 and that guy starts on day 1, huge impact, right? Receiver, tackle. We've talked about some of these positions before. You draft those positions, those are the guys that are going to make most of the impact. Free agency, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that money is used to retain some of your players that are walking into free agency because the free agent market isn't super sexy this year. Wide receiver, yes. How many of those guys will get franchised? We'll see. If Pittman's available, Ridley's available, I think you could see the Patriots sign one of those guys, which obviously would bring a lot of impact. Donnie, love the show, bro. Thanks, Donnie. I appreciate the super chat. Means the world to me. Every dollar that we get here is an extra dollar in my pocket that, frankly, I need. Right now, I'm unemployed, and I'm a one-man band. And if you haven't used YouTube as a creator before, it's not a ton of money that you're raking in unless you're up to like 100,000 subscribers, which brings me to 2,000 subscribers being the goal by March 1st. But Donnie, thank you. I appreciate the super chat. Back to Belichick and the Brady relationship. Belichick failed to understand that just because it worked his way wasn't the only way that it could work. Because your way works doesn't make it the only way, right? I do this podcast a certain way. I've approached radio during the time I hosted for 10 plus years. I approached radio a different way. Of course, Boston Sports Talk, done different, right? That's the whole tagline of this show. It doesn't mean that the way I do this is the only effective way. There are a lot of other people that do media, and they do it much differently than I do, but they're highly successful, highly rated. Belichick was so tunnel visioned in his way and doing things his way with his approach that it certainly seems like he did not really entertain handling Brady in any other way than he had always handled Brady. And I don't know if it was a concern that he thought Brady might act differently, that it might affect the relationship, but him staying stuck in that way affected the relationship and harmed the relationship to the point that Brady wanted out. And it's unfortunate that Belichick, who's a highly intelligent individual who has worked with thousands of players, a guy who coached for 50 years in the NFL, he worked the same way, and he handled Brady the same way, as if no other way would have been successful. And that is unfortunate. More thoughts in a minute. Don't forget to give us that like. Take a second of your time. Those likes mean an awful lot. Doesn't mean a ton to you to just click that thumbs up button. Means a lot to us here with the program. Rate, review, and subscribe. Trying to hit 2,000 subscriptions by March 1st. You know, other players in craft. Here's another point that we need to bring up, because some might look at this, they might watch the documentary, and they might say, oh, Brady wanted preferential treatment. Brady wanted to be treated differently. You could argue he should have been treated differently because he's the GOAT and he's the quarterback, and that's how a lot of these things work. But even if you wanted to come at me with that kind of an approach and say, well, he just wanted to be treated differently, he wanted that preferential treatment from Belichick. The players that are in this documentary, Gronkowski, Welker, Slater, Devin McCourty has a number of comments in this documentary, Robert Kraft. None of those people look at Brady as somebody who wanted preferential treatment. Brady did not act differently. He didn't act differently with his teammates. He did not act differently from when he went to, the greatest of all time, from where he came from. He was mostly the same guy in that locker room. Of course, his brand was being built, and he was doing his own documentary, and the endorsements came in, and he married a supermodel, and all of those things. But in that room with his teammates, he was mostly the same guy. And his teammates did not look at Brady as somebody who was trying to get more than he should have been getting from the head coach. And that should bother everybody, because it wasn't like Brady was asking for the world. Belichick was just, again, unrelenting, which is frustrating to no end. And what's even more frustrating is you need to learn from your history. I am a believer in that. If you don't evolve over time as a human, you're not doing it right. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. Hopefully, you're not the same person you were 10 years ago. You've evolved. You've matured. You see things a little bit differently than you did back then, right? And I think it's an indictment on Belichick and how unwilling he was to change, that he went from this really rough relationship at the tail end between he and Brady, and he went right into the next quarterback of the future, quote unquote, and Mac Jones, and handled Mac Jones the way he handled him. Now, you could hate Mac Jones. You could think Mac Jones sucks. That's not the conversation. Let's not move the goalposts. The conversation is that Belichick handled Brady as tough as he did, and he saw that Brady, who was the most consistent dude, the greatest player that he ever coached, alongside Lawrence Taylor, and that relationship deteriorated because of how Belichick was so damn tough on Brady day in and day out. And it looks like Belichick didn't learn from that, because Belichick handled Mac Jones in the same way. Not bringing up his name with the media, right? Not singling him out when he played well from time to time. The whole Chicago debacle on national television with Bailey Zappi. Belichick had a very rough relationship with Mac Jones. So he had a rough relationship with Brady, a rough relationship with Mac Jones. I'm sure if Cam Newton was here for longer than a year, inevitably that would have been a rough relationship. So Belichick with quarterbacks, not ideal. And so he didn't learn from the mistakes that he made with Brady. He didn't learn from that relationship going sour. He didn't look at that and say, well, man, the way I handled Brady, that didn't work out. We could still have the greatest quarterback of all time, but because of how harsh I was towards him, it went sour. Maybe I try a different tact with the next guy. Belichick was Belichick, stubborn as the day is long. And so he handled Mac the same way that he handled Brady, and I think that helped inevitably break Mac Jones. Because Mac Jones lost the confidence. Mac Jones felt like his coach wasn't supporting him. And Mac Jones played for Nick Saban. So he had been coached hard before. But Belichick is a different kind of cat. And you just get this feel that Tom Brady is one of the only quarterbacks that could work with Bill Belichick. His time in Cleveland as a head coach, the quarterback position didn't go well. The relationship between quarterback and head coach was not good. Brady, for a long time, it worked out with Belichick, but inevitably, again, even Brady was like, damn, I've had enough. I know we've won 6 Super Bowls and gone to 9, but I'm sick of this ish. And then Mac Jones, a relationship between quarterback and head coach wasn't a good one. There's the old saying, if you keep having to bring in new roommates, maybe it's not the new roommate's fault, right? Maybe it's not the bad roommates that you're picking. Maybe it's you, if you're the common denominator. In Belichick, whether it was in Cleveland, with Brady, with Mac Jones, he's the common denominator. That relationship between those two positions on the football team, it hasn't gone well. Outside of Brady, who was able to eat all of the crap in humble pie for 2 decades. He failed to learn. Belichick failed to learn after the Brady split. It also explains the animosity from Robert Kraft, right? Like if you're Kraft, you're looking at this, you say to yourself, his treatment of Brady forced Brady out. He told me that Brady was done, and Brady clearly wasn't done. The issue was the personnel around Brady and not Brady himself, because he went on and won a Super Bowl with a more talented Tampa team. So you forced him out with the way you treated him. Then you told me he was washed when he clearly wasn't washed. And then after Brady left, you had no plan at that position. If you're a Kraft, you're pulling your hair out. You're going bananas. And it also, I think, this explains Gerard Mayo and the current staff that has been assembled here in New England. Because Robert Kraft, the players, some of the other coaches under Belichick, they saw this. They saw the relationships that Belichick had. And certainly not all of them were bad. And all. I'm not saying that. But they saw Belichick's approach. And it's clear that they look at Gerard Mayo and they say, this is a new brand of coach, a new personality, a different personality. All of these guys that are being brought in are talking about connectivity. Alex Van Pelt's video yesterday on social media that was released by the Patriots, he's talking about connecting with the players and connectivity. We've heard the same thing from DeMarcus Covington in prior interviews. We've heard a lot of it from Gerard Mayo. Connecting with players, treating them like humans, earning their trust based off of the relationship before the X's and O's. And whether it's going to work or not, we don't know. But it's clear that Robert Kraft and other people within this organization saw Belichick, what he did for almost a quarter of a century, and while it worked for a long time, and all the appreciation and respect for the great 2 decades and 6 Super Bowls, the decision was made, we got to go a different route. We got to get away from that style of coaching. It might blow up on them, but I think it explains why the staff is the staff right now. Don't forget to like, rate, and review. It takes a second of your time to like the program. It means an awful lot to us. If you're sitting there on YouTube watching and listening, just take that second, click that thumbs up. You can also like us on Facebook, Twitter /X. Rate, review, and subscribe. Trying to hit 2,000 subscriptions by March 1st. So a lot going on in this documentary. I can't wait. For the doc to come out tomorrow. Mr. Snoopy, AAA, Belichick and Kiss, my season ticket took us. The ASS had enough. Rick jumps in, says, let's be real. Belichick has a touch of the tism. He's a genius, but maybe wasn't the greatest in terms of connecting. He was always best when his staff was diverse and forward-thinking. You know, it's interesting where, again, Belichick, he is who he is, for better or for worse. And I think when you are that way, eventually time's going to run out. Eventually people are going to get tired of you. I mean, there's only a finite amount of time that people are just going to sit there and just get continuously blasted in the face by their coach. And I think it tells us an awful lot. I mean, Gronk wanted to be done after what, 7, 8 years? I mean, he was done. He didn't want to be in New England anymore. We knew that. He had enough. The guy retired when he had plenty left in the tank and only came back because, Brady went to Tampa. But Gronk couldn't deal with it. He could not deal with the unrelenting Belichick. He was here in New England for 9 years. He had enough. He was tired after year 7. And he stayed for another year or two. So, when you coach like that, there's a shelf life. And I think we should give a lot of credit to Brady for dealing with it. I mean, if there's anybody that had leverage, if there was anybody that could walk into that office and say, Bill, enough is enough, it would have been Brady. Like, what else do I have to do? And this goes well beyond just Brady talking in this documentary and telling us that the relationship, the treatment of him from Belichick was the top reason why he decided to leave the Patriots. It wasn't money. Don't forget, when Ian O'Connor wrote the book about Belichick, going back, I think it was 2018, there was an assistant coach in that book that said, give us any top 15 quarterback and we would do what we've done. Absolute smack in the face of Tom Brady. And that's how they looked at it. That's how the staff looked at it. That they won, but they could win as much as they won with any top 15 quarterback. That's insane. That is such a detachment from reality. And it shows you how the head coach and how some of that staff views the quarterback position. And it leads into, again, how Mac Jones was handled and how they didn't feel like they had to surround him with great weapons because they didn't appreciate the quarterback position. They don't appreciate offense as much as other staffs do. And if there's anybody that could have walked in that room and said enough is enough, it would have been Brady. But he kept eating the humble pie. He kept dealing with it because they were winning. He found ways to cope. But at the end, he had done enough coping. All right, let's switch to some Celtics. I want to squeeze some Celtics in. I understand it's all about the postseason, but we're at the All-Star break. And I want people to appreciate, speaking of appreciation, we should appreciate that what we just witnessed pre-All-Star break, first half of this season, is the best Celtics first half of a season since Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Ray Allen. This is the best first half record-wise since the 2008-2009 season. And Stu Greeny had a great post last night on Twitter/X. Celtics are 43-12 overall. Against teams that are 500 or better, their record is 22-11. They're 21-1 against teams that are under 500. They're 26-3 at home. They're 17-9 on the road. They're 18-8 in clutch games. Celtics have a 6-game lead when you woke up this morning in the Eastern Conference. That is a significant lead. In the NBA, they're third in defensive rating. They're first in offensive rating. They're number one in net rating. They are by far, when you look at the analytics, when you look at the record, you look at the production, they're the best team in the NBA right now. They're number one in net rating by a full 3 points, which is kind of crazy. Here are my 5 takeaways from this first half. Don't forget to give us that like. Don't forget to subscribe and throw in those comments as well. Every like means more eyeballs to the product, means the world to us. 5 takeaways from this first half. Let's start with Jason Tatum. Tatum's playmaking is at another level. He is now at the point, we saw this on Tuesday night in Brooklyn, he's scoring 30-plus points in the first half and then decides that he's just going to get his teammates involved and make the magic work as a creator for others. His playmaking ability is getting better and better and better. His basketball maturity on Tuesday night speaks volumes to where he's at right now in his career. Some unreal numbers on Tatum. Steve Bulpett had this post, and this is from Dick Lipe. Tatum, who played only 28 minutes and 23 seconds last night, posted his 12th consecutive game with at least 20 points and 7 rebounds. That's tied with John Havlicek, 1971, for the third longest streak in Celtic history. Bird had a 15-game streak in 86. McHale had a 14-game streak in 86. Also, Tatum has 45 assists over his last 6 games. We talk about that playmaking. Tatum has 45 assists over his last 6 games. That's his most in any 6-game span during his career. And during that time, he's averaged 29 points, 10 rebounds, and 7.5 assists. The only other Celtics who have ever in the long history of this franchise, the only other Celtics who have ever put up those numbers during a 6-game span are Larry Bird and Hondo. Sean Grandy had this post. Tatum played in his 323rd win last night. Only 5 players in NBA history have played in more before their 26th birthday. None of those 5 other players played in college. Tony Parker, Kobe, LeBron, Dwight Howard, Jermaine O'Neal. Tatum turns 26, by the way, if you're wondering, on March 3rd. He has 4 games left. He's 2 wins behind O'Neal. Jason Tatum has done some unbelievable things before the age of 26. And again, I understand it's all about the postseason, but it doesn't mean that we don't appreciate what Tatum's doing to this point and what this team is doing to this point. And they're just learning how to play alongside each other. I mean, Drew Holiday was traded for in October. Takeaway number 2. And by the way, I still am sick and tired of Tatum taking too many pull-up jumpers, especially from 3. He's still obsessed with the pull-up. Drives me nuts. Takeaway number 2 for the Celtics first half. The post-up offense is real, and it is fantastic. For the last few years, I've been losing my mind watching the Celtics offensively because they would never post up. Marcus Smart was a good post-up player. He never posted up. Al Horford can post up from time to time, dependent on matchup, and he hardly ever posted up. When they traded for Kristaps Porzingis this offseason, I mentioned on that Kristaps pod, which you can check out, Cattle's on Causeway. It's a Celtics podcast that I used to do. I talked about Porzingis, and I talked about how much of an impact player he can be because of his ability to post up and change this offense. And he has. They have posted up, top 3 in frequency in the NBA, and they've been one of the most productive post-up teams in the league. JT, JB, KP, and Drew can all post up, are all efficient when they post up. So that's takeaway number 2, the post-up game, effective, which will be huge for this offense when they get to the postseason. Third takeaway, just mentioned Porzingis. He has been every bit the impactful player that I expected him to be. His 3-level offense. He can post up, he can hit the mid-range, and he can kill you from 3. Since January 1st, this guy is shooting at a clip from three-point land that is outrageous. His ability to impact the game offensively at all 3 levels, be a facilitator when he needs to be, just means so much to the rest of this team, especially Tatum and Brown. When they get bogged down offensively, we've seen this. They can go to KP and get a good look. Their late offense should be better and more efficient with Porzingis in the playoffs. And his rim protection has been spot on. His ability to defend the rim, to block shots, to change shots, to rebound the ball, Porzingis has been excellent. Takeaway 4, Derek White, he's just fine as a starter. Some people were wondering what would happen, right? He's doing just fine. He is shooting great from three-point land. I mean, my man is doing some unbelievable things from 3 this year. And not only his shooting percentage, which is almost 40%, which would be a career high aside from his rookie season when he didn't take a lot of threes. It's not only that he's making threes, it's the types of threes that he makes, and it's when he makes those threes. 5 of 10 last night. He is somebody who has shown that he can hit the pull-up three. He can hit the catch and shoot. He can hit the three from weird angles in the corner. He can hit the three from above the break. I mean, he can hit the three pretty much in any way you ask him to hit those threes. And he has really stepped up in the fourth quarter. He has been tremendously effective in the fourth quarter. And talk about playing on both ends of the floor. That's what White does. Excellent defensive player as well. The block shots, the steals. I mean, we're talking about somebody who has upped his game. Derek White is better than I ever thought he would be. All around. Better shooter than I thought. Better creator than I thought. Better defender than I thought. He's the only player in the NBA this season, according to StatMuse. I reposted this morning. If you want to follow me, it's at Nick C Radio. Where's my finger? There it is. At Nick C Radio. The only player in the NBA right now with 50-plus steals, 50-plus blocks, and 100-plus threes, the only player in the NBA right now with those numbers is Derek White. He is unique. He is talented. He is somebody who always says the right things. He's loved within the locker room. Derek White is awesome. My fifth takeaway, Joe Mazzulla is going to be questioned throughout. He will be questioned until we get to the postseason. He will be questioned until if and when they win a title. But let's not forget, talent wins titles in the NBA. He can certainly help, but talent wins titles. The ability to hit tough shots when you need to, the ability to not get stalled offensively, the ability to play defensive possession after defensive possession like your life is on the line. I mean, look at last night. I think the mentality of this basketball team is something that we should all be happy about. Last night, I didn't know what to expect. I mean, you're walking into the final game before your All-Star vacation. All these guys that aren't going to the All-Star game are, if not all, most of them are planning on vacations. They're flying around the world. They're doing this. They're doing that. They're thinking warm weather and sun, few drinks on the beach. And sometimes a team, last game before the break, they look like they already have their bags packed. I thought it spoke volumes that last night. They went in second night of a back-to-back against a Brooklyn team that they know they can be and should be. But they walked in last night without Jaylen Brown, completely dialed in. That defense in the first quarter was one of the best defensive quarters I've seen this team have this season. And that speaks volumes about this team's mentality and how they're approaching things. They wanted that win last night. They walked into that game saying to themselves, this is an opportunity to play a great basketball game before we get to this break. We don't want to sit around during the All-Star break on our vacations thinking about how we stunk it up the last night before we got this break. And they played on both ends, dialed freaking in, including Jason Tatum. And Tatum's ability to play night in and night out and produce can't be overlooked. Can't be overlooked how much he plays. So I understand it's all about the postseason, but all of us should be thrilled about this first half. I don't know what else you would want from this team in the first half. Best record in the game, a big lead in the East, third in defensive rating, number one in offensive rating, number one in net rating, best record since the 08-09 team, pre-All-Star break. They've stayed relatively healthy, and they're still gelling. We should all be happy. All right, that'll do it for today's podcast. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Like, comment, and subscribe. Trying to hit our 2,000 subscribers goal by March 1st. You can help us doing that by subscribing to this podcast. Rate and review Spotify, Apple Pods. I appreciate you. Back tomorrow at 11 a.m. with more Patriots and more Boston sports to talk about, I'm sure. Thanks. Have a great day.